Have you ever felt like the weight of the world rests on your shoulders? You smile at a crowded party, yet inside, there's nothing but a cavernous void. You strive to please everyone, your lover, colleagues, family, only to find yourself becoming a stranger to your own soul. We've all stood in that place where the thirst for approval, the hunger to be loved, and the fear of abandonment forge us into a smiling mask. But what if we let go? What if we stopped clinging to what was never truly ours? What would remain? In today's reflection, we'll journey into Stoic thought, not as a lecture in dusty philosophy, but as a return to self. From that place, you will no longer need permission to live freely. 1. Let go of the need to be liked. Every act of authenticity reclaims your freedom. We grow up in a world that constantly urges us to become a version acceptable to others. From an early age, we learn to seek approving glances from parents, high grades to please our teachers, and later, the approval of co-workers, friends, and social media. But the older we get, the clearer it becomes. Living to please others is a game without a finish line. The desire to be liked often begins in waddle ways, saying what others want to hear, pushing past our limits to maintain a favorable image, even reshaping our beliefs or interests just to avoid exclusion. Yet over time, without awareness, we lose ourselves in the endless pursuit of external acceptance. Stoicism faces this reality head-on. Whether we are liked or not lies beyond our control. The only thing within our power is our actions, our attitude, and our character. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." The implication is stark. When we live to be liked, we hand over the reins of our life to others. The truth is, no one can please everyone. What one person admires in you may be precisely what another condemns. The more we mold ourselves to fit each relationship, each social circle, the more we lose our direction. Like a distorted mirror, the reflection no longer resembles reality, and we begin to forget who we are. Stoicism does not ask us to become cold or isolated. It urges us to live with integrity, not anchored in the fleeting judgments of others, but rooted in virtue and reason. The Stoic does not ask, "What will people think?" but rather, "Is this aligned with my values?" To let go of the need to be liked is not to stop caring about others. It is to stop trading your truth for their approval. It demands courage to say no when necessary, to choose truth over comfort, to remain steady even when misunderstood. And it is in those moments that we begin to build an inner foundation, one immune to the eyes and words of the crowd. Picture an artist painting a canvas. If they constantly adjust each stroke to appease every viewer, will the artwork still carry their soul? So it is with life. Each of us is an artist crafting our greatest masterpiece, our own life. And that work holds meaning only when painted with honest hands, not steered by fear or comparison. Those who live truthfully rarely seek to please, but they attract genuine, deep relationships. Authenticity has a gravity of its own. When you live by your values, you emit a certain frequency, and those in harmony will find their way to you. And those who drift away, they simply walk a different path than yours. The Stoic knows that a true happiness does not arise from recognition, but from alignment between one's actions and ideals. When we no longer rely on others' gaze to determine our worth, we feel a quiet liberation, as if unshackled from an invisible weight we've carried far too long. That is when we can finally smile, not because others permit it, but because we have chosen to live in truth. 2. Let go of the need to know everything. It's not about knowing more, but knowing enough. In the age of information, We live in an endless sea of knowledge. Every day, millions of new data points are created. Phones buzz constantly, inboxes overflow, and social media never stops updating. The moment we wake, we're swept into a current of content of intent. Reading one thing, watching another, scrolling to the next. But in the end, what remains isn't clarity, but a mind clouded, and adrift. Stoic philosophy recognized this long before the internet existed. Its sages warned against the burden of useless knowledge. They did not reject learning, but posed a crucial question: does this help me live better? If not, it becomes mental noise, a form of inner turbulence that robs us of peace. The urge to know everything stems from fear of falling behind, of not being good enough, of being outpaced. Yet ironically, it's this fear that turns knowledge into a weight. Instead of learning to grow, we learn to fill a bottomless void of insecurity. We keep seeking, yet nothing truly sinks in. To the Stoic, wisdom does not come from collecting facts, but from discerning what matters and what does not. Some read thousands of books yet cannot remain calm when insulted. Others lack academic credentials, but live with astonishing composure and clarity. Depth of thought is not measured by how much we know, but by how well we live what we know. The Stoics likened the mind to a cup. If you keep pouring when it's full, the contents spill, and nothing is retained. Likewise, when we absorb indiscriminately, our minds lose the ability to filter what truly holds value. What we need is not more, but less. Less noise, less trivial curiosity, less craving to know it all. Letting go of the need to know everything is not a rejection of learning. It's a commitment to learning what truly serves our growth. It may mean revisiting a truth so simple it feels worn, like focus on what you can control, yet living by it daily, applying it in every reaction, every decision. Today's world pushes us to be everything: experts at work, informed in debate, current on news, on trend with culture. But this pursuit scatters our attention and exhausts our spirit, because when everything matters, nothing truly does. The Stoic is not interested in knowing more, but in knowing what matters. And what matters is not the world's answer, but the answer to this question: does this make me stronger, more peaceful, more virtuous? If not, no matter how alluring, it is noise to be discarded. Releasing the need to know everything is also an act of trust in life's unfolding. We don't need to predict every twist, analyze every outcome, or control every detail. Instead, we learn to be present, to listen to life, to respond with intention, rather than react from habit. In that simplicity, we find clarity. A mind unburdened has space to think deeply, to feel truly, to navigate with purpose. Stoic thought never says we should stop learning. It says, learn what is essential and let go of the rest. Because the more we try to know everything, the more we lose the one thing that matters most: awareness in the present. 3. Master your reaction. Refuse to blame. Stop blaming. Start owning. Every day we face things beyond our control. People say unpleasant things, unexpected events disrupt our plans, or old wounds resurface. The human reflex is to assign blame on others, circumstances, or even fate itself. But Stoic philosophy does not view the world through the lens of blame. It does not deny that people can be hurt, insulted, or thrown into difficulty. What it emphasizes is this: we cannot control what happens, but we can always control how we respond. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgment about them." In this thought, suffering arises not from the situation itself, but from our response to it. And our response is always within our command. When we blame other circumstances, We hand over hidden power, the power to shape our emotions, our actions, our attitude, by saying, "I'm like this because he did that," or "I failed because no one helped me." We unconsciously become victims, passive players in our own lives. The Stoic rejects that role. They do not deny that others can be wrong, or that a situation may be hard, but they refuse to let those things define how they will live next. They choose conscious response over emotional reflex. This is not easy, and that is why it reveals true inner strength. To master your reaction is not to suppress emotion or pretend nothing happened. It is a process of awareness, first noticing the emotion arise, then pausing instead of reacting, and finally choosing an action aligned with your core values. When insulted or criticized, your first instinct may be to defend or retaliate, but the Stoic asks, will this reaction serve me? Will it help me preserve my calm, my character, my dignity? If not, they choose silence or a purposeful reply unshaken by emotion. In daily life, mastery over reaction shows up in small things: a last-minute canceled meeting, someone cutting in line, a thoughtless remark from a loved one. These moments do not determine our day. Our reaction to them does. That is what shapes our mood and energy. The Stoic understands no one can make me angry unless I permit it. Negative emotions are not born from the outside, but from within. When I agree with an insult, when I allow a situation to breach the bounds of my reason, by refusing to blame, we reclaim something essential: the authority over our lives. When there's no one left to blame, there's no excuse left to delay change, no one to wait for, no one to unload on, only ourselves, capable of choosing, acting, and living in alignment with our deepest values. And in that moment, we stop being victims. We become the authors of our own lives. This is not an easy path. It demands ongoing self-awareness, patience with oneself, and relentless intention. But it is the only path that leads to real freedom. Freedom from emotional turbulence, from unstable circumstances, and from the reactive patterns that have trapped us for far too long. 4. Escape the argument trap. Not every battle deserves a fighter. Argument is an unavoidable part of daily life. From the family dinner table, to the workplace, to social media, we are constantly drawn into exchanges framed around right versus wrong, win versus lose. While many debates begin with a desire for understanding, they often devolve into contests of ego and the need to dominate. In Stoic philosophy, not every argument is worth engaging in. The Stoic does not seek victory in words, but peace in the mind. They understand that winning an argument does not equal discovering truth, nor does it guarantee respect from the other side. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion." This is not a sign of weakness, but a mark of the freedom to choose one's own perspective. When we decline to enter a pointless dispute, we are preserving our mental energy for what truly matters. An argument becomes a trap when we value winning more than wisdom. In that state, the goal shifts from understanding to proving we are right. Every word, every point becomes a weapon, not to illuminate, but to assert the self. And when ego drives the exchange, even victory leaves us alone on a battlefield that never needed to be fought. Stoicism teaches that calm is the true expression of inner strength. Wisdom lies in knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to remain silent. In some situations, not reacting is the most powerful response. Silence does not mean defeat, nor is it evasion. It is an intentional act, a choice made after asking, will my words now bring clarity, or only add to the tension? If they do not serve truth, then they are noise. Escaping the argument trap also preserves our clarity. Every dispute, no matter how small, drains mental energy. It scatters the mind, stirs emotions, and pulls us away from the balance that Stoics seek. By choosing our conversations wisely, we safeguard the mental space needed for reflection, deep thought, and deliberate action. Not everyone is ready to hear reason. Some argue only to reinforce what they already believe. In such cases, continuing the exchange only locks both parties in a futile loop. The Stoic understands not every fight requires a fighter. Sometimes the strongest move is a calm withdrawal. Refusing to argue also touches a core Stoic principle: control only what lies within. We cannot force others to understand, nor compel them to change if they are not ready. But we can govern ourselves, choose whether to continue, to respond, or to fall into the trap of conflict. In necessary moments, the Stoic still speaks their truth, but they do so with humility, without expectation. They share to illuminate, not to win. And if there is no openness in return, they step back, protecting their inner peace from unnecessary disturbance. Ultimately, escaping the argument trap is not the loss of your voice, but the refinement of its use, choosing when and where to speak with the aim to build, not destroy, to connect, not divide. This is not retreat, but an act of a free person, one no longer ruled by the compulsion to prove themselves with every word. 5. Embracing imperfection. You don't need to be perfect to have worth. In modern society, perfection is often idolized as an ideal to attain. We are constantly pushed to be better, smarter, more perfect, in appearance, career, relationships, and even in how we feel. On social media, people usually share only the best, most successful parts of their lives, creating the illusion that everyone else is living an ideal life except us. Stoic philosophy, however, does not endorse chasing unrealistic images. Instead, it calls us to face our true nature, flaws, weaknesses, and wounds included. In the Stoic worldview, growth doesn't come from achieving perfection, but from learning to accept imperfection as an intrinsic part of being human. Seneca once wrote, "I have begun to be a friend to myself." That statement marks a profound shift from judgment and resistance to acceptance, compassion, and self-understanding. The Stoic does not deny what they have yet to achieve or the flaws that remain. They do not delude themselves with blind optimism. Instead, they choose to confront, observe, and improve without rejecting themselves in the process. He says, accepting imperfection is not surrender or apathy. It is an honest act of self-recognition. It's being able to look in the mirror and say, I still have much to improve, but I do not hate myself for it. From that place of acceptance, one can grow sustainably, not driven by shawls, but by love and steady resolve. Stoicism also reminds us that flaws are part of the human condition. No one, not even the greatest philosophers, escapes mistakes, negative emotions, or moments of weakness. What sets people apart is not avoiding those experiences, but how they respond to them. A Stoic does not judge emotions, but sees them as signals to observe, to better understand the self, and to adjust behavior in line with reason. A clear symbol of this spirit is the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, highlighting the cracks rather than hiding them. These lines become part of the object's history and beauty. Similarly, the Stoic does not conceal pain or the past. They transform it into a source of growth and inner strength. In daily life, accepting imperfection shows in simple yet profound acts. Admitting when you're wrong, not pretending to be strong when you're hurting, or allowing yourself to rest when exhausted. It can also mean learning to listen to the voice within, not to judge, but to understand what's truly unfolding inside. One of the most common mistakes is tying self-worth to performance, success, or outward image. Stoicism rejects that mindset. A person's value lies not in perfection, but in fidelity to ethical principles. Whether in comfort or in adversity, one may fall 100 times, but if they hold on to honesty, composure, and the will to move forward, they are living the Stoic path. Imperfection also makes genuine human connection possible. When someone dares to live openly with their flaws, they create a safe space for others to do the same. And it is within that authenticity that people truly understand, empathize, and uplift one another. Embracing imperfection is the foundation of a resilient inner life. It allows us to move forward, even if we're unfinished, to love ourselves, even as we continue to grow, and to live with presence rather than being trapped in the cycle of comparison, expectation, and judgment. 6. Rewriting your life story. The past doesn't define you. Today's choices do. Each of us lives according to a story shaped over time, a narrative formed by experience, memories, what others have said about us, and how we see ourselves. This story doesn't just live in the mind. It influences every decision, reaction, and expectation in life. But not every story is true. Some are born from childhood wounds. I'm not good enough. I always get rejected. I don't deserve happiness. Others from comparison. I'll never succeed like them. Or past failures. I tried and failed, so I can't change. Stoic philosophy doesn't dismiss these experiences, but it asserts a central principle. External events do not define our worth or destiny. Our interpretation and response to them do. Epictetus once said, "We are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them." If a story makes us feel heavy, unworthy, or powerless, the problem lies not in the past, but in the way we retell it to ourselves. The Stoic does not let old narratives imprison the present. They examine themselves with awareness and dare to ask, am I sure what I believe is true? Does this belief still serve me? Do I have the power to tell it differently? In this self-inquiry, a new door opens, the door to rebuilding, redefining, and renewal. Rewriting one's life story doesn't mean denying what happened. The Stoic does not forget the pain, but they choose what the pain will mean. Rather than remaining a victim of circumstance, they become the protagonist, the one who learns, grows, and remains undefeated. They make adversity part of the path, not the prison. To rewrite your story also means releasing the labels society, family, or even you have placed on yourself. Failure, not good enough, weak, unrealistic. These labels only hold power if we believe they're true. But once we realize every story can be rewritten, we reclaim the right to decide who we are. This process doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, inner observation, and daily practice. It can begin with small shifts. Instead of saying, "I always fail," we say, "I've learned a lot from my failures." Instead of repeating, I could change one thing today, what would it be? Stoics also understand that reshaping our thinking must be matched with action. A new story only gains meaning when lived daily, through the way we respond, set goals, establish boundaries, and treat ourselves. No story is theory alone. It must be embodied through consistent, intentional behavior. By rewriting our story, we reshape the future. A person who believes they are strong acts differently than one who believes they are doomed to fail. The difference is not in the circumstance, but in the foundational belief within. And the beauty is, that belief can be changed. Stoicism doesn't promise a perfect ending, but it gives us the tools to take authorship of a new journey, unbound by our former selves. In a world where everything changes rapidly, the freedom to rewrite ourselves is one of the most powerful liberties we hold. To rewrite your life story is not wishful thinking. It is a courageous act, the act of someone who refuses to resign, refuses to blame, and refuses to wait for a miracle. They become the storyteller of their own life, with awareness, reason, and unwavering resolve. 7. Finding stillness in solitude. Loneliness isn't what you should fear. Forgetting yourself is. In a world of constant connection, where notifications ring every few minutes and online presence often seems more important than real presence, loneliness is often misunderstood as a negative state. Many see it as a sign of social failure, abandonment, or emotional deficiency. Yet in Stoic philosophy, solitude is not something to avoid. It is a sacred space to return to oneself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You can retreat into yourself whenever you like. Nowhere is more peaceful than your own soul." These words reflect a profound truth. Peace does not come from the world outside, but from the ability to be present with yourself in silence. For the Stoic, solitude is an opportunity to cut through distraction, to observe the mind, and to realign with what truly matters. There is no one to please, no noise to drown out your thoughts, no role to perform. Only yourself, whole and honest. In that solitude, you can hear your inner voice more clearly, a voice often drowned by the noise of the world. In that space, emotions, memories, and thoughts rise into clarity. And if you have the courage not to flee, it is in that moment that self-understanding and mastery begin. Yet solitude can also be a great challenge. It forces us to confront emptiness, the fear of being forgotten, and the darker parts of the mind. There is no one to blame and no one to lean on. But the Stoic sees something valuable in this. When there is nothing left outside to rely on, we are compelled to build strength from within. Finding stillness in solitude does not mean rejecting society or withdrawing from life. It means intentionally creating inner space, space not filled with work, small talk, or endless scrolling. Only in that stillness can we truly examine our emotions, which fears are real, which expectations are false, and which desires arise from our core values rather than external pressure. In this light, solitude becomes the ideal setting for practicing Stoic principles, mastering one's reactions, accepting what cannot be changed, and strengthening reason. Unshaken by noise or opinion, one can quietly reflect, correct course, and plan forward action without needing validation or applause. One way Stoics harness solitude is through writing. Just as Marcus Aurelius did in his meditations, writing is not only a method of organizing thought, but a gesture of radical honesty. It's like looking into a mirror, but instead of seeing your face, you see the architecture of your soul. Setting aside time each day for stillness, even just 10 to 15 minutes, can profoundly shift the way we experience life. It might be a moment of doing nothing, simply sitting in silence, letting the mind breathe and emotions pass without interference. In these moments, we realize we don't need anyone or anything to feel complete. The Stoic does not fear solitude, for they are not alone in the sense of abandonment. They are fully present with themselves, and when they have mastered that space, they return to the world more whole, unshaken, unneeding of approval, and firmly rooted in themselves. Stillness in solitude is not the destination. It is a place to pause, to restore, and to remember this. Everything needed for a peaceful life is already within. 8. Reject the consumerist life. Choose simplicity is strength, not lack. In a world where everything is marketed as a must-have, people today easily fall into unconscious consumption. From clothing and technology to experiences and even information, we are constantly pushed to buy, accumulate, and chase the new, believing it will bring happiness, fulfillment, and status. Stoic philosophy, however, approaches happiness from a completely different angle. According to the Stoics, we do not need much to live a meaningful life. What we need is to understand what is enough. Simplicity is not just a lifestyle. It is a discipline of the mind, a way to reduce dependence on externals and cultivate inner strength. The Stoic does not reject material wealth, but is wary of attachment to it. The more desires we have, the more we risk losing our freedom. When we feel we must have a possession, a comfort, or an experience to be complete, we place ourselves in a passive role, dependent on external conditions for inner contentment. Seneca once advised that we should live as if we could lose everything tomorrow and still not lose our peace. From this, we see that happiness lies not in having more, but in needing less. Simplicity in Stoicism extends beyond material things. It includes lifestyle, habits, and thought. Simplicity is the ability to say no to what distracts the mind. Toxic relationships, the need for validation, the chase to stay on trend. It is the act of stripping away the unnecessary to focus on what truly matters. In practice, simplicity can begin with small steps: decluttering, limiting time on social media, eating with intention, or scheduling more chaos into the day. These acts not only reduce chaos, but create space, both physical and mental, for deeper reflection, better decisions, and a more intentional life. The Stoic knows that a person's value lies not in what they own, but in how they live with what they have. Someone may live in a modest home, walk instead of driving a luxury car. Yet if they live by their inner values, they can feel free, grounded, and content. Endless consumption often brings anxiety, fear of loss, fear of falling behind, fear of not having enough. In contrast, simplicity brings a sense of ease, because the simple life requires no image to maintain, no competition to win, and no social standard to chase. The simple person sets their own standard, one of awareness, restraint, and inner freedom. Another aspect of simplicity the Stoics emphasize is the ability to distinguish between what we want and what we need. Much of what we chase isn't truly needed. It's simply what we've become accustomed to wanting. Simplicity is the ongoing discipline of asking, does this serve a life of virtue, awareness, and peace? If not, no matter how appealing, it is unnecessary. Choosing simplicity is not a rejection of the material world. It is a way to reset our relationship with it. It reminds us that we are the masters of our lives, not slaves to our desires. Stoic philosophy aims at a life guided by reason and self-command. And one of the clearest expressions of self-command is the ability to say, that's enough. Enough desire, enough comfort, enough to live fully without losing oneself. 9. Reestablish personal boundaries. Protect your life energy. Each of us possesses a finite reservoir of mental energy, a kind of fuel that powers our thoughts, emotions, and actions throughout daily life. When this energy is left unguarded, we become prone to exhaustion, disorientation, and a loss of inner clarity. One of the most practical ways to sustain inner stability, according to Stoic philosophy, is by setting and maintaining clear personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are not walls that divide us from others. They are a self-protective system for mental, moral, and emotional health. They define what we allow into our inner life and what we choose to keep out. Setting limits is not selfish. It is a conscious act to safeguard our inner integrity from intrusion or fragmentation. In modern life, a lack of boundaries often leads to feeling invaded, drained, or out of control. People are easily pulled into the needs, emotions, and expectations of others, allowing their boundaries to be crossed just to maintain outward harmony or avoid guilt. But from a Stoic standpoint, True harmony begins within, when we know how to say no to what does not align. The Stoic is always clear on what is within their control and what is not. The mind, choices, and personal values are treasures to be preserved. That is why they set boundaries, not to shut the world out, but to ensure their thoughts and responses remain unhued by external chaos. Maintaining boundaries not only protects against conflict or harm, but is also an expression of self-respect. One effective way to set boundaries is by identifying what drains your energy, be it unnecessary conversations, toxic relationships, overcommitments, or prolonged tension. The Stoic learns to observe and remove these influences proactively, rather than letting them quietly erode their spirit. Beyond avoiding negatives, boundaries also carve out time and space for inner restoration. This might be morning meditation, uninterrupted reading, or a tech-free evening to return to silence. Staying loyal to these boundaries helps refresh the mind and preserve clarity in complex situations. In relationships, clear boundaries reflect self-command and strength. A person who can say no without guilt, who can decline conversations that diminish their character, or step away from situations that no longer serve them. Living by Stoic principles, they do not control others, but they do control how they engage and respond in every interaction. Boundary setting also carries responsibility. The Stoic doesn't expect others to understand or agree. They commit to honoring themselves through concrete action. When a boundary is crossed, they do not assign blame, but instead reinforce their internal safeguards. This allows them to remain steady, even as the outer world shifts unpredictably. In Stoic philosophy, inner freedom exists only when we govern ourselves first, and setting personal boundaries is a fundamental practice of that self-governance. It doesn't just reduce conflict, fatigue, and stress. It creates the space where reason and virtue can truly thrive. 10. Recognize what's beyond your control and let it go. One of the core principles of Stoic philosophy is the distinction between what we can control and what we cannot. This is the foundation of inner freedom, of calm, and of a life led by reason rather than emotion. According to Epictetus, we truly control very few things: our thoughts, decisions, choices, attitudes, and responses. The rest, whether, what others think, their emotions, the outcomes of our actions, the past or the future, lies beyond our reach. So if we tie our peace or happiness to these externals, we will always live in anxiety and disappointment. Stoic thought teaches that suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from expecting them to unfold as we wish. When someone offers criticism, if we try to control their thoughts, we fall into a spiral of reaction, hurt, and resentment. But if we accept that their feelings are outside our control and focus solely on our response, we preserve our inner freedom. Recognizing what we can't control requires clarity and practice. In many moments, our first instinct is to intervene, fix, or worry about what's out of reach. But the Stoic learns to pause and assess before reacting. Is this within my control? If not, can I let it go without losing my integrity or principles? Letting go is not indifference or neglect. It is a deliberate act, a choice made from understanding one's limits. When we release what we cannot control, we don't abandon responsibility. We shift focus to what we can change: ourselves. In daily life, this shows up in practical ways: not obsessing over gossip, not forcing outcomes at work, not criticizing over past mistakes, not overly worrying about an uncertain future. None of these are within our absolute control. The only thing we can do is act rationally in the present, with full awareness, integrity, and effort. Letting go of what we can't control also eases anxiety, anger, and frustration. emotions that arise when we resist reality. The Stoic doesn't fight life pointlessly. They live like a rower, unable to control the current, but always able to steer their oar. This ability to let go also brings clarity into decision-making. When one is no longer swayed by emotions tied to uncontrollable outcomes, one acts from reason, not impulse. They choose paths aligned with their values, not paths shaped by pressure or others' expectations. Stoic philosophy does not deny the difficulty of letting go. It teaches that inner liberation doesn't come from controlling the world, but from mastering it. Letting go is a strength, for the one who does so refuses to let the world dictate their mood, actions, or identity. Ultimately, when we accept what we can't control and focus on what we can, we not only live more freely, we live more effectively. We are no longer distracted by the trivial, drained by the unchangeable, or lost in a futile race against the world. When I first encountered Stoicism, I never imagined that a philosophy over 2,000 years old could offer such clear answers to modern crises. But the more I lived with it, the more I realized you don't need to be a philosopher to practice Stoicism. You just need to be someone who wants to master yourself. I started with the smallest things. Each morning, before reaching for my phone, I spend 5 minutes in silence, not to think deeply, but simply to return to myself. When anger rises, instead of reacting, I've learned to pause, take a breath, and ask, does this reaction serve my values? Practicing Stoicism isn't about seeking perfection. It's about living mindfully in every small decision, every single day. And little by little, I've found myself less swept away, less shaken, and more grounded inside, no matter how loud the world gets. If what you've just heard speaks to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content on strengthening your inner life and living with greater resilience from within. And finally, remember, you don't need to master the world. Just master yourself. From there, everything else will begin to find its rightful place in your life. See you in the next video.